Switch on computer audio. Phil. Phil. Okay, there's Phil. Okay. So I'm here on Facebook with Philip Bornstein, a veteran real estate attorney with many years experience in from small transactions to large transactions and everything in between. And having known him myself for, let's see, what has it been, Phil? Like maybe 15 years?
Probably more than that, Brian.
I think, yeah, I think more. So I can, truly recommend him. And, he's certainly a person that we're very fortunate to have here to talk with a little bit. So yeah, welcome to the Facebook Live, Phil. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
And good evening to the fans.
So we'll just kind of dive right into it. The first question that I have is, some people that may be watching this might be first-time sellers or first-time buyers, and so what is a buyer or seller? What should they look for in a real estate attorney? And can you talk a little bit about what's the role of the real estate attorney in this process?
Excellent question, and a good question even in normal times, but especially a good question in these times where things, are not normal and transactions are not taking place the way they have in the past. So to answer your question, if you had asked me that question 3 months ago, the answer would be, I think people often make the mistake when choosing an attorney of not giving enough thought to the personal connection. I have to tell you quite honestly that 90% of the time, a prospective buyer or seller's first question to the lawyer is, how much is it going to cost me? And while that's an important question, I'm not sure that should be the first question, because the things that are really more important, most lawyers are going to be in some reasonable range of attorney services. So I'm sure you can save a few $100s perhaps from one guy to another guy. The real question is, am I getting a qualified guy who's going to be able to do the things that I need and want them to do to guide me through the transaction? Do I feel like I have a good rapport with this attorney? Do I feel like he or she communicates well with me? Am I able to reach them when I need to reach them? Are they on email or some social media where I can get them? Because right now, obviously, you have people not necessarily in their offices all the time. So you want to know, am I going to be able to reach my attorney when I need them? So I would say that the big question is, do I have a personal connection with this attorney that I feel that I can trust him to guide me through what's probably going to be the largest financial expenditure of my lifetime? So I often tell people it's kind of akin to if you needed a surgery and you were trying to choose the doctor that's going to do the surgery, your first question probably wouldn't be, well, how much does this particular doctor cost for my surgery? Although you might ask that somewhere along the way, but your first question is probably going to be, I need the right guy for this operation. Have you done a lot of them before? Have you been successful before? Do you know what you're doing? Do you, can I reach you and ask questions when I have them? Those would be, at least for me, the things I'd want to know from my doctor. So I think the same for a lawyer. While the financial consideration is important, the real consideration is, do I have the right guy for this job? Is he experienced in the particular thing that I need him to be experienced for? And does he know how to guide me through this transaction? And do I feel like I'm going to be able to communicate well with this person and have them serve my needs? So I think for me, that's what would go into choosing an attorney. Now, I told you that was my 3-month ago answer. Let's talk a little bit about what's changed now. And I would say what that is transactions are not happening the way they used to happen. Kind of traditionally in a real estate closing, everybody gets together at a conference table together. You have your buyer, your seller, your broker, your bank attorney. So you have a mortgage person, realtors. You got a lot of people sitting at that table together. That's not happening anymore, obviously, for social distancing reasons and for general safety reasons. So there is no one way things are happening right now. It's kind of a hodgepodge, feel as you go. I've done probably 7 or 8 transactions in the last month and a half, and no two have been the same. Sometimes we're doing it remotely where nobody gets together at all, and we send the documents and the money electronically. That's one way things are happening. I had one where some people went to the closing table and sat distanced apart with masks and gloves and signed paperwork, while an attorney sat outside in her car and did not join the proceedings, just waited for everybody to do what they had to do. And then when it was time, somebody ferried out to the attorney the money and the documents, and she slid through her window, her car window, her portion of the documents. So that was another way it happened. And I've probably had 3 or 4 other ways that, you know, were similar to this. So in choosing an attorney, you might want to ask that attorney, how are you servicing your clients during this unusual time? Because I think there are some attorneys who are saying, I don't want to be involved at all. You know, maybe I have underlying medical issues. Maybe I'm an older person. Maybe I'm just a nervous person, and I'm not really comfortable doing a transaction where I might be asked to sit in a room with other people. And so that, you know, that might be an added thing you're asking an attorney right now is, how are you going to be able to handle my transaction during this strange period of time? Does that answer your question there a little bit?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And from the real estate broker side as well, we, yeah, having those creative solutions and having, you know, many different ways to get things done, I think is important, both from the broker side and especially, you know, from the real estate attorney side as well. And I think also you touched on being accessible and available. I mean, recently I had a transaction where the attorney, you know, and this often happens, maybe it was a family attorney and spends a lot of time in court. And so he really didn't have the time needed to prepare, even just to prepare contracts. So it made the transaction drag out quite a bit. And, you know, I think sometimes people don't always know that there's definite difference between someone that does maybe a little bit of everything as opposed to, you know, someone that specializes.
Right. And you know, the key word that you said, and the key word of the times right now, I think, is adaptive. We have to be able to be adaptive to, you know, think outside the box and find, you know, ways to get things done that would not perhaps normally have been our ways to get things done. On one of the transactions you and I worked on together recently, I drove to the seller's home on the morning of the closing in the Bronx, which is not something I would normally have done. And I had them come out and meet me in the driveway, and they signed documents on the hood of my car. And then I was going to go straight from there over to the closing to trade in those documents for the proceeds of the sale of the house. So that's not a normal thing that would have ever happened before, but it was the best way, you know, on that particular day to get that done. So it's really about being a little creative and adapting to, you know, new situation.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great point, and we're seeing a lot of that creativity now in the brokerage community as well. Up until recently, most listings certainly didn't have a virtual, you know, VR tour, you know, like something similar to Google Maps, where you can, you know, go through the apartment or the building virtually. And very few listings had a video, and now all of a sudden, you know, nearly every listing has at least a video, and quite a few of them have VR tours. So yeah, so we're seeing a lot of creativity, a lot of adaptability needed right now. And so as far as, since you touched on a little bit of what you're seeing as far as activity, what are you seeing in general as far as activity and you know, during the time of the pandemic now?
Well, so one of the interesting things that's happening, I got 2 new deals in this week, which is a strange, you know, week and time to get in new business. You know, how did somebody even find a buyer for their house when they're not really allowed to show the house? And how did they in turn find another house for them to move to when they're not really allowed to do anything? So, but one of the things that they shared with me is, while in one sense it's perhaps not a good time to be a seller because people can't barely look at your house, On the other hand, there's not a lot of product and inventory out there because people are shying away from the market, assuming that nobody's looking at houses. And so in this particular case, the people said, I think it was an advantage to us that we were probably one of the only houses on the market. And even though people, perhaps couldn't get inside the normal way, with a virtual tour and with the fact that the buyers knew the neighborhood and knew where they wanted to be, they felt that their house got a lot more looks than it might have ever gotten any other time, because it was one of the few houses being offered in a desirable neighborhood. And they had multiple offers on a house that people can't really look at. So, and they selected one, and within a couple of days we're already in contract. So, perhaps one advantage of these times is if you're ready and willing to make a little extra effort, if you have a realtor who's set up to do a VR kind of thing, and to market in a little more creative ways, and get people as close as you can get them without being allowed to get inside until the time that changes. And don't forget, these rules are changing on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, with the governor putting out new rules about who can open up and who can do things, and when realtors can start opening their offices and showing houses again. So that's going to change over time. But even with the limited choices that they may have now, deals are still happening and deals are still getting done. So the short answer to your question is, yes, you can still sell your house in this market, and yes, you can certainly buy a house in this market. However, it may not be the way that you're used to, and it may not be perfect for everybody, because if you are a person who says, no, I need to be inside, I need to touch the walls, I need to feel the floors, well, you may not be able to do that right now. So yes, still an okay market, but not, obviously not normal and not at the level that we're used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's interesting, and that's kind of paralleling what I am seeing. I'm having buyers contact me and sellers contact me that are interested in going forward with transactions. And while the activity that I'm seeing is obviously not as brisk as it was in good markets. I am getting inquiries, and so there are people out there looking. And what you're saying is definitely very interesting, that while 6 months from now or a year from now, we could be very well dealing with a very different market, meaning heavily in favor of buyers, and due to many different reasons, unemployment and businesses and so on and so forth, potential foreclosures. Right now that stuff hasn't happened yet. So especially in markets where the inventory is short, there still are ready, willing, and able buyers. And so with some creativity, people can go ahead with their plans to make a move. And as far as from the legal side, like what, if anything, is changing as far as, contracts or paperwork that's kind of come about as a result of the pandemic?
Well, it may be too soon to tell exactly what's going to change. Certainly, I've seen a few attorneys try to insert a clause that somehow encompasses, COVID, but it's hard to do yet because, nobody knows quite what's going to happen. So, for example, traditionally in contracts, some contracts, there'd be what was called an act of God clause or a force majeure clause that said if something unusual happens in the world that prevents this, either the seller from being able to sell or the buyer being able to buy, that perhaps that excuses their performance and the contract is allowed to be undone. So a lot of people are saying, oh, well, this, COVID-19 must fall under that because this is clearly an act of God or some kind of force majeure, and that should allow people to, back out of a contract. But the reality is that's probably, not necessarily going to work, because banks are still lending money and closings are still happening. So just because somebody may be nervous about the future of the world, or nervous about the future of real estate values, or maybe it's just deciding, because of what's going on, I just don't want to finish my sale right now, or I don't want to complete my purchase right now, that's not necessarily a legal excuse to get out of the contract. So in answer to your question, what's going to start changing about contracts going forward? attorneys may start to try to put in a clause, maybe directly addressing the pandemic that we're in now, rather than leave it vague and say act of God, force majeure, where we're not even sure this qualifies as one of those. They may just try to say, if this transaction is interrupted due to COVID-19 because, and then really list a specific because the bank's shut down, or the bank can't lend money, or the bank changes the appraisal because they feel the values are changing. It has to be some outside excuse like that, where you're able to say, no, I still wanted to move forward, but I no longer can move forward. What I don't think is going to fly, but some attorneys may try, and in fact one already tried with me this week, is just to stick in a general clause that says, if we want to back out due to COVID-19, we have the right to back out. And that I don't think is really going to work, because people are going to, that's akin to having no contract at all. If somebody can merely say, I decided because of COVID-19, I'm too nervous to complete this deal, well, that's not really a basis upon which a reasonable person is going to want to go into contract.
Okay, interesting. And so, and as far as title, just want to ask a question about that. Who normally picks the title company, and for a potential buyer, what kind of issues do you normally see?
All right, well, let's tell the truth here, Brian. 9.5 out of 10 people have never heard of title insurance and don't really know what title insurance is. So, and probably don't even really care. So the answer to your question is that most of the time, a solid 97 or 8% of the time, it's the attorney for the purchaser that's going to choose the title company. And the reason is that that's just kind of the nature of how the industry has developed, that the attorney, as part of their job in representing the buyer, has a relationship with a title company and calls that title company to run the title search. Now, for those who don't know what that is, the title search is the search that is ordered on a property to check the history of that property, to make sure that the owner you're buying it from is in fact the right owner of the property, to make sure that there are no liens or judgments or lawsuits or violations or anything that's affecting the property that would be a problem for you as the buyer going forward. And what you're aiming for at the end of the day is to get what they call clean title. And clean title means that that the title company search has turned up none of these kinds of violations. So who orders that? The attorney. The purchaser very rarely gets involved or really even knows what's going on unless it turns up a problem. If it turns up a problem, everybody becomes aware of what title insurance is and what needs to be done. If nothing comes up, people rarely think about that at all. But occasionally, just to put it out there, there's no law that says your attorney has to be the one to order the title report. So if you have a relationship with a company on your own, or if your friend works at one, or if you have a relative in the business, or you just say, I would like to go and shop around and find my own title company, that's entirely permissible too. You would just tell your attorney, I would like to shop for that myself, or I have somebody I would like you to use. Some attorneys may push back on that and say, I really prefer dealing with the company I have a relationship with. But if they do, that should really be a factor you consider in choosing your attorney, because there's no reason that an attorney should not permit you to search for that company on your own. The reality in New York is most companies for title insurance purposes are the same, in that by law, they must charge you the same fees. So the major components of a title bill, the cost of the insurance, the mortgage tax, the transfer taxes, all the things that a title company collects at a closing money-wise are fixed dollars that are set by law. No matter which company you go to, should be exactly the same. So where you're getting any difference is in the service provided. Are they there when if I need something? If there's a problem with my title, is there somebody to call and talk to about it? If after the closing, I need a copy of something I forgot, or a year later I'm refinancing and I need something from my purchase, is that company still going to be in existence? And is there going to be somebody who's able to help me with that? So you might, if you're choosing one on your own, you might want to, you're choosing really based on service, not so much a price thing, because again, the prices are fixed by law.
Okay. Thank you. And how would people get in contact with you if they want to hire you or have any questions? What's the best way?
Okay, so again, for the record, my name is Phil Bornstein. My office is in Astoria, in New York. And if somebody needs to call, for a free consultation on a real estate related matter, you can find me at 718-545-0400. That's the best way to start. After that, I will often give somebody my email information so that we can shoot back and forth questions if the time comes. But for
Okay.
now, we'll stick with that.
Okay. And I'll also put that in the comments section as well, so that if people want to reach you, to hire you for their real estate transactions, that they'll be able to have your phone number as well. So yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us here today, Phil. Phil is as I mentioned in the beginning, is an attorney that I've known for nearly 2 decades, and is a true professional. So if if you need a real estate attorney, he's one of the best out there. And I've been in real estate as a broker for 21 years, and so I've certainly worked with many different real estate attorneys. And it's a very important part of the transaction, is choosing the right attorney and making sure that you have someone that, yes, is accessible, is, I think, a specialist, and then also really stands up for your interests, protects your interests, and at the same time, has some creative solutions in their repertoire. I can remember, and I think you probably do too, the first closing, my first purchase, when we went to the closing table, and pretty much everything that could have gone wrong on the loan side was wrong, including, I think, the interest rate was wrong on the closing documents, and I think even they didn't even send the checks. Do you remember that? That it was what
Yes.
we call a dry closing. Dry closing means there's no money, right, Phil? No money.
Yes, but you won't find that in any textbook, of course.
So there was no money. There was a wrong interest rate, and Phil chewed out the loan officer pretty good and made him straighten things out, which he did. And subsequently, I think the next day or a day later, they did send the checks, and I brought the checks to the other attorney, and they gave me the keys for the apartment. So it worked out well. But I think the right real estate attorney is really a huge part of the process. So again, thanks for being here today, Phil, and look forward to talking to you again in the future.
My pleasure. Everybody stay safe.
Okay, take care.